to? No, I'm already in share mode, so I'm good.
Okay.
Is ILA 196 or 916 still there?
That is Deanson from the United Kingdom, and Deanson said that he was having a problem with his microphone.
Okay. I see a lot of people still have their microphones muted too, so recognize that we won't be able to hear you unless you do unmute your microphone. So Phil has unmuted everyone, but you still have to unmute yours as well. Kay and Helen and Sheila Bentley. Actually, Sheila, I would love to hear from you if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit, since today's webinar was, your webinar was a catalyst for today's.
And Sheila's unmuted.
Oh, I guess she's not back to her. She might not be back yet. Julia Cameron. Oh, this is funny. I don't know if you guys can see all of these names flashing across the screen, but if you are typing on your typewriter, then you are actually making noise, and so the recording is picking you up. So maybe the unmuting wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to go through and mute then, and if anybody would like to speak again, you can then unmute your microphones.
So I'm looking at some of the chats that came in, and somebody said, hey, why don't you just finish the first part of the webinar that we didn't get a chance to finish? And somebody else said, you know, we're much more comfortable if we know we're going to be talking. Okay. So Michael and Tom, if you wouldn't mind, we can go ahead in and finish the webinar from the first time. And then we, of course, are always getting the chats coming in, so we can open it up for people to participate. You don't have to wait for the participation question.
Okay.
Does that work for you too?
Sure. Whatever's going to work best for everyone. We can be flexible.
I like flexibility. So we have to go all the way up to where we ended, which was right here. No, it wasn't. The tips to finding common ground and provide a non-judgmental presence. Why don't you two talk a little bit more about how to find a common ground between diverse individuals in terms of providing the non-judgmental presence, because that's one of the things that I think captivates me personally so much about you two is when I am in your presence, I feel like I can share anything. How do you do that?
There's a story that, you know, many years ago, I was going to be officiating at a wedding for a couple, and they were a little older. They had both been married before, and the male of the couple had a child he was bringing into the marriage. His fiancée asked to meet with me privately, and so I met with her, and she said, "There's something I need to share with you." That I have to confess that I don't like my fiance's child, and I'm concerned about that. She said it's because the child has disabilities. And she said, I know that you have a child with disabilities too. And so she said, I was actually afraid to come to you to talk about this. And she said, I just don't like people with disabilities. And as the father of a child, who was in that category, my human reaction, my internal reaction, was that my stomach started to churn, and I'm sure my blood pressure rose. And, my gut reaction was, well, I don't know if I like you now. But I didn't say that, because I realized that there was a thing behind the thing. Why is it that she didn't like this child in particular, and people with disabilities? And so rather than say, how can you say that? Why do you feel that way? Or I resent that. I just listened to her more as she explained, and asked her, well, what is it that is concerning you? And it really, I believe, was that she was afraid. She didn't know how she could be a parent to this child. And so there was a fear there. And the more she explained it, the more I could have empathy with her situation, because I know that it's hard to be the parent of a child with disabilities. And I guess the point is that rather than immediately judge her and even lash out at her in some way for her opinion, an opinion that actually hurt me, I listened more to her and just continued to listen, to understand it. And when I began to understand it more, it became easier to be non-judgmental, because I knew then what was behind it. I don't know if that's helpful, but when we are willing to hear somebody out rather than quickly judge them, we learn there's a reason behind it, and that makes a difference. That helps us to again form a connection with them, that maybe we can talk more about it then.
Well, and it strikes me that it's very similar to what Tom had been talking about before in terms of measuring up. Humans seem to have this common ground of the fear of measuring up.
Right.
Will I be able to do something? Will I be able to be the mother of a child with special needs? Will I be able to be a good wife? Will I be able to do whatever? So we have that fundamental fear of.
And when we can connect on that level, it is amazing what kind of difference that makes. We can respect each other more. We can hear each other better, and we can help each other. That's when we earn the right. We talk about the right to be heard. When we show that we're not going to just automatically condemn someone for their opinion, but we're willing to hear them out and try to understand where it comes from. And then we can begin to work together, to actually maybe like each other.
Yeah. And Michael, I really appreciate your vulnerability in admitting what your initial reaction was. And I think that that's really powerful, because oftentimes we look at people like you two who go, you must be some form of a saint or something to be able to be so non-judgmental. And it's not.
We always say, ask our
wives. I'd be glad to tell you.
And it's not that you're non-judgmental, it's that you don't necessarily lead with that judgment, or you don't lead with that judgment. You keep the judgment internal. So I think that's really important. Could I ask you two to do just shift your computer a little bit, because for the recording, what's happening, Michael, is you're getting perfect. You were getting cut off a little bit by the gallery block. Perfect. Tom, did you want to add anything to that?
There was something I was thinking of a minute ago about that. Yeah, I just think that, if our overall goal is to form relationships and connections, we always just need to keep in mind that we are more alike than different. And, again, always try to see the thing behind the thing, because we all have a thing behind the thing. And if we get caught up on the externals, we can immediately write off the relationship. And if the goal is to hang in there, to form deeper connections, then we need to be able to see what's below the surface. There is a quote that I think Michael referenced earlier, but we'll say it again. Fred Rogers, the late Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, is somebody that we quote often. And Fred used to always say that you can't help but love somebody once you know their story. And I think it's in that knowing and trying to get to know one another, why we react and respond the ways that we do. it helps us give each other a little bit more grace and empathy.
Yeah, and so what we wanted to ask people, one of two things. How else do you try to find common ground with people? And or what tricks have you found to not be as judgmental, at least overtly, with others when you're listening? And I know John Backman actually was in line there. So, John, I think you're unmuted.
I am now unmuted, and actually I'm going to go to a slightly different direction if I could.
Sure.
I think, guys, what you just shared, that story about the mom who was worried about being a mom to somebody with disabilities, just strikes me as so essential right now. And I'm thinking in terms of the context of talking about difference. I sense so many people are feeling so little room to have those conversations. And I'm thinking particularly of people who have, because of their identity group affiliation, they have privilege, sincerely want to counter that privilege, but have no idea how to go about it. And I think a lot of them feel like they don't have the room to fumble and sound ignorant and figure out how to have those conversations. And now that I'm fumbling, I'll stop.
Yeah. How do we do it? So you did take us in a different direction there. This responsibility that we feel.
Well, I don't know if this answers anything or is helpful, but when someone reaches out to us, we'll just put it, say, in writing, because we wonder, well, how can you be empathetic, with someone who's just writing to you, for example? We always try to, and we tell this to people in person too, but we'll write back to them after they've reached out and shared something that's vulnerable or difficult, and just say, you know what, we're very proud of you. We know it's not easy to reach out and share with somebody, especially if somebody you don't even know, something that is so personal and so intimate and so hard. And that can help people just by acknowledging that it's hard to do it. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to make a mistake. It's hard to talk about something that is embarrassing. But letting someone know that we understand that makes a huge difference. And that's how our trust is earned. And that's how vulnerability will continue, because we acknowledge it. We acknowledge the difficulty and say, it's okay. It's okay. And we feel that way too when we have to open up or need to share something or a mistake that we've made.
Tom, you look like you had a story brewing there. Am I right?
I did. And actually, I wanted to bring this story up in the first hour. And I see a connection in my mind, and I hope you can see the connection as well. But again, referring to Dr. Brene Brown, she shared this one story one time where she got up and gave this talk to a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And afterwards, about vulnerability. And afterwards, one of the Fortune 500 company CEOs came up to her and kind of made a beeline towards her and said, so you're saying I should just say to all of my investors that our company is tanking right now and be vulnerable in that way. And she jokingly said, if you want to still have a company and a job, by the end of the day, you probably don't want to do that. But she did follow up and say, but I would hope that you would have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people in your corner that you could share very openly and honestly about that. Because if you don't, then you're hiding things and you're not actually telling the truth. You're not being truthful with who you are as well. So I think, again, it comes back to that point that we had made earlier of having those safe places and those safe people in our lives. Do that.
Yeah, that is so incredibly important. I see that Helen wanted to jump in with a continuation of the thing.
Laura, before we
Oh.
get to Helen, Mark has been on the line. He had earlier had some problems with his microphone, and he has something to a comment that he would like to make. And so I've unmuted your microphone, Mark. If you'd like to interject, please do.
Hello, everyone. I just joined ILA about a week ago, so looking forward to working with everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I think common ground is something we have to consciously work on. I think it's very easy to look at someone and say they're different and go from we're different to thinking that I'm better than the other guy. It's a slippery slope, and we have to consciously work against it. And I also have a story to tell. So I'm pretty good at navigating. I can go to a foreign city and take a map and get around pretty much without too much trouble. My wife cannot. Now, on the other hand, one day we found ourselves at a department store, and I was looking at shirts and stuff. And I said, well, I'll come back to this later on. So I walk off, and then later on I want to go back to the shirt I saw earlier, and I could not find my way back. But my wife told me, hey, follow me, and she found it. So my point here is that people are actually very flexible and they're capable. And sometimes we use our skills, men or women, whatever, we use one set of skills in a certain situation, but other people use it slightly differently or in a different situation. And we need to be aware that we do have this in common. Sometimes it doesn't manifest itself in different ways, but behind that, we do have the stuff that we can work together with.
That's a really good point, Mark. So if I heard you correctly, what you're talking about is people having similar skills, but just in different context. They exhibit themselves in different contexts.
I guess skills is a starting point, but as Tom and Michael have talked about, we share a lot more. We share the human experience, love, joy, pain, all that stuff. And we sometimes do it in different ways, but fundamentally, we do share a lot in common. And to me, we actually do have to make the effort and have these kinds of stories to remind ourselves that, yeah, sometimes it looks very different from the outside, but then if we actually spend a little time and think about it, we can oftentimes find something more meaningful and more connecting behind all this.
I like that. I like
We
that.
agree. We absolutely, and thank you, Mark, for helping to articulate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And then Helen, are you there with the thing behind the thing?
I am here, Laura. Yes, the thing behind the thing, Tom and Michael reminded me of an incident that happened to me quite some time ago when I was working human resources. After lunch one day, one of the ladies who worked in the factory came up to my office, very upset and distraught, to say she had had her purse stolen in the supermarket when she'd gone shopping at lunchtime. So I immediately think, oh, I can fix this. So I say, oh, okay, we'll give you an advance on your salary, and you can pay it back over the next few weeks. Problem solved. And she keeps on crying and crying. So I'm thinking, hey, I've solved the problem here. And of course, that wasn't the problem at all. The problem was that her husband was going to beat her up when she got back home. And that's always stayed with me, that we very rarely know the backstory of people we are listening to. And the example may not be as immediate as that or as dramatic as that, but we never know the whole story, actually. And we should never think we can fix things for anybody else, because somebody in ILA said just recently, the most important thing we can do for somebody is simply to listen. Because so often other people want to fix things, want to give solutions, and actually that doesn't help. It's the listening that counts. So I was reminded of that when Tom and Michael were giving their story.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Helen.
you.
Great example.
That's exactly right. You are exactly right.
And Michael and Tom, if you want to build on that, I know that you probably have other stories about the thing behind the thing, or being open and vulnerable, or another topic.
Oh gosh, we have countless stories. I mean, we can think of one where there was a woman who reached out to us for her husband. Her husband wouldn't reach out, but she believed he needed some help, and he kind of admitted he did too, but wasn't willing to reach out. So she did, emailed us. And we agreed, yeah, we'd love to meet him and talk with him. He needed to set some stipulations of where he would meet, how long he would meet, what time of day he would meet. And we realized there was a thing behind the thing going on there. We didn't know what it was. So we agreed to meet him. And we met him for about 90 minutes, so much time he allotted. And he told much the story of his life. But it wasn't until minute maybe 80 of the 90 that the thing behind the thing came out. And he needed all that time, there's the other 80 minutes, to make sure we could be trusted, to make sure we weren't going to judge him for what he was going to tell us, to make sure that we weren't going to bolt from the room or tell him to get out of the room and that he's completely wrong or whatever. And it's so important to give people the time to listen to them, to give them the time to get to the thing behind the thing. It really is, not to try to rush the process, not to try to fix something they're not asking to be fixed. And he didn't need us to fix anything. He just needed, other than his wife, this thing she was the only one who knew it. He needed to.
Actually, Laura, that was one of the points I know that was on the PowerPoint that we did want to talk a little bit about today. We'd like to talk about, we'd like to ask some questions about it. It's really important to us that we create a safe environment. And what does it look like to create a safe environment, whether it's through social media or face-to-face? Again, we meet people, in all kinds of different environments and settings. We meet people locally in coffee shops or restaurants. We met men in bars, if that's a safe environment. Through social media, I remember one time a guy reached out to us from Africa, actually, and his initial meeting time with us was over Skype, but he wouldn't use the video option on Skype. And so it was just a blank screen, and that was really important to him because he saw us, but we couldn't see him. And it was really important in that first meeting that we could kind of prove that we were trustworthy, because the issue that he was dealing with was something that if he were to voice it out loud in his culture in Africa, he could have potentially been, his life could have been on the line.
Wow.
So that was really powerful. So there was this level of anonymity through the blank screen. And then preceding meetings now, we foster a connection where he does trust us because of that initial safe environment that we were able to create.
How do people find you?
We do have a website, www.someonetotellito.org, Facebook page, Someone to Tell It To, Twitter account, Instagram. And some people find us that way. But most of the time, people who find us, including people internationally, it's through referrals. Somebody who's known us, who's read our book, who has we've had someone we may have helped. They may have a connection with somebody, some of those people who recommend us. So much of the time, it's by referral.
Actually, could you tell us a little bit about your book? And I know that you have a book, but you've also been in the Chicken Soul books. Is that right, Chicken Soul?
Chicken Soup for the Soul books, yeah.
Yeah. So tell everybody about those.
Yeah, actually, the story that we had referred to in the first hour of the man from Saudi Arabia is a fascinating story of, again, how you can utilize social media for good, because he's somebody who had read, Michael and I had both been published several times in various Chicken Soup books, I think maybe 8 books, different individual stories, and we had never been published in the same book. And this gentleman from Saudi Arabia had read our individual stories in different books, and really found a lot of value in the stories that we shared, reached out to both of us individually, private message on Facebook. And so we started this correspondence. And then I remember one morning I came in, I said, "You're never going to believe this. I have this, friendship that I started with this man in Saudi Arabia because he read one of my stories." He goes, "What's his name?" And Michael shared his name. And then we found out that it was the same man. And that man, then fast forward several months later, was when he lost his first child. And he learned about our mission together through someone to tell it to. And then we've supported him now over the last year.
3 years now. 3 years now.
Years because of the death of his 2 children. So
wow.
Our current book came out in 2014 called Someone to Tell It To, Sharing Life's Journey. And it's 50 essays, several of which are about our own life stories and our own life journey, and also how our nonprofit started and why we started it. And maybe half of the stories in the book are about other individuals who have given us permission to share their stories. And we encourage you to read it, because I think we hope that there's a lot of hope and healing to be found in just not only in telling stories, but also in reading other people's stories.
Because and the people have given permission to share their stories because they want other people to be helped, and through those stories. And one of the main reasons for us writing it was to let people know that they're not alone. That the story, they may be some individual things to their story that are unique, but again, we're all human, and we all have the same feelings, the same fears and insecurities and vulnerabilities, and when we can read that somebody else has those as well. We had one person who, after reading our book said, "Now I realize I'm not such an oddball after all." And we realize that's great, because we want people to know that we're all in it together.
Yeah, and I can attest, I'm reading your book right now, and it's absolutely captivating because every chapter is a different story. And I just love reading all of the stories of the different people, because I guess indirectly I get so many good ideas in terms of being a better human and being a better teacher and being a better partner and being a better whatever. It's just wonderful to read other stories. They're very powerful.
And we've written a second book. It's with a publisher now. We're hoping that it will be published, and this year that is our hope, our goal. And it's called Someone to Tell It To, Moved with Compassion. And the whole book is about stories of compassion, or stories where compassion was not given. And we believe that the world needs more compassion today. And so we write about that, and are very excited for that to be published.
Might you be able to give us a sneak preview of a story that we'll find in that book about compassion?
Actually, you've heard some snippets already from some of the things we've told that are going to be in there.
I could share one. I know one is with a young girl. She's given us permission to share her story. She's local here in Pennsylvania. And her initial question, because we are trained pastors, we love to enter into conversations about matters of faith. That's like our favorite thing to do. We don't ever project our religious perspectives onto anybody. So we do have people from other religious affiliations are not sure what they believe. We love that as well. This girl, it just so happened she had made a decision earlier in her life as a teenager that she was not proud of. And as a result, she private messaged us on Facebook. Again, she was a referral. And her first question out of the gate was private message on Facebook to someone to tell to is God mad at me? And it's a question that I think any human probably has wrestled with, whether you believe in a God or not. And so to be able to start off a dialogue with her via private messaging was fantastic. And then we ended up meeting her in a coffee shop. And it was local here in Pennsylvania. And we could point her out right away because she said she's permanently disabled. And so she comes hobbling into the coffee shop that day and plops down, in the chair across from us. And right away, she did not beat around the bush. She said, "I need to know, is God mad at me today?" Based on what she had done earlier in her life. And again, most of that conversation was, yes, certainly listening, but also trying to remind her. We use the word beloved often, reminding her of her own belovedness, her sacredness, that we all have value just as human beings. And we've walked alongside of her, and it's been pretty phenomenal. In fact, we just met her recently for her birthday because she's permanently disabled, and she, like myself, is right on the cusp of being a millennial. A lot of her friends, after she became permanently disabled, dispersed, and she doesn't have a whole lot of social connections. So we met her at an Applebee's here, is a restaurant in America, and we wanted to celebrate her birthday when no one else was. And it was fantastic. As we were leaving the restaurant that day, she pointed on the wall. She said that was me. She had won a state field hockey championship. And she said just a line that was heart-wrenching, but actually beautiful at the same time. She said, "I used to be pretty once, but now I'm not." And she was the homecoming queen, and was in a serious car crash. And as a result, her whole life has changed. So, those are the types of stories we are privileged and honored to hear almost every day.
Powerful, very powerful.
And she wants that story to be told, so that other people can learn and maybe not feel so alone.
Yeah. Dimitri actually had to leave. He said it was very, very early morning in Moscow, so he had to leave, but we're so grateful that we were able to draw people from so many different places. But I know that actually Terry Werner has a question for you too. Terry, would you like to ask it yourself?
Oh my gosh. Am I back on here?
You are back on.
I'll put my video on. Well, my question is a simple one. I'm here in the United States, and we have this new President Donald Trump. And I'm thinking about the context of his being vulnerable, and what advice would you give President Trump about being vulnerable?
What do you mean by that? Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the question?
Well, I'm thinking about lessons to learn in everyday life in its immediate time and its immediate practice. And so I'm trying to find the good in everything, and listening without judgment, listening to people's oppositions that, as an educator in the classroom, you try to remain relatively in the middle, neutral, and nonpartisan. And I'm trying to figure out a way that I can get the students to understand the language that Donald Trump uses in terms of either his tweets, his use of social media. There are a lot of things that I find very fascinating in a good way about Donald Trump. But I know that the conversations around some of his supporters or people that believe some of the ideologies that he has come up are silenced. And I don't want to lose their voices, but I'm curious as to how, if I were to try to have a group exercise, and I've told some of my students I'm going to be participating in this webinar, I want to hear from the two of you. What would your advice be to Donald Trump if he was, listening? Because I think that he's open to some kinds of ideas, but what kinds of advice do you think he might be receptive to in terms of his understanding of what being vulnerable means as a president? And this is in comparison to President Barack Obama. So you've got these very different types of approaches to communication and interacting with others, as well as being self-reflexive. I don't see very much of that from Donald Trump, but I do think that there are times when he's very willing and doesn't care about being vulnerable. Like, he's out there. What advice would you give? Is it too much, Donald? And this isn't about whether he's going to listen or not, or even implement any of that. But I mean, there are people in my classroom that are just like Donald Trump, who have this concept of, I know that people are going to be vulnerable, that they might be sharing their ideas. And I have ideas too that would make me vulnerable, but I'm afraid that because it's goes against the grain, that I'm not going to say anything. But I'm still looking to Donald Trump for, this idea of being vulnerable. Is it too much? Not enough?
It's an excellent.
It is an excellent question.
Yeah, we talked all afternoon about that topic. We were just recently on a conversation with Mr. Ken Blanchard. I don't know if that name is familiar to any of you, but he wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It sold 20 million copies. We had worked with some of his extended family, and he heard about our mission and has been very supportive. But we were just on a call with him 2 days ago from California, actually, and we almost got invited to the National Prayer Breakfast with him. It turned out because everybody wanted to be there this year, we couldn't go, but we're going to be invited next year, which is pretty exciting. But on our call with Ken Blanchard, who knows about our work and the way that we operate, he said his words of advice to Donald and to any politician or any religious leader or whoever it might be is listen twice as much as you speak. And I think that is universal for all of us. I think when one of the dilemmas that we see, whether it's with him or anyone, is when we don't have appropriate filters. I think we all need filters. We all need to be held accountable for the things that we share, because I think, again, oversharing can create division just by our oversharing. And I think we need to figure out ways to, again, have healthy vulnerability. What does healthy vulnerability look like for somebody like him? Probably a lot like the Fortune 500 company executive. He needs to have a couple safe people in his life that maybe he could filter things through those individuals before things get blasted to. And now he's in such a popular position that anything that he shares, it raises heads, it raises eyebrows,
and raises our lower stock market, or things like that. And there, it is important when you're in a position like he is, anyone like him, to be very careful how they share and when they share, because it does affect people's lives, and livelihoods, and that's significant.
I'll use a quick example. We're both writers, and we love to write. We blog actively, and just one of the principles that we've started is we always filter everything that we write through somebody else. We never share something that we're going to post for the whole world to see or hear or read unless it's been filtered. And I think that that's a good practice probably for everyone, that maybe we don't need to just blast, the walls of Facebook before it's been filtered. Do you really need to share that right now? Do you think that that's actually going to create more division, or do you think that that's going to create unity? And if you think it's going to create unity, then okay, but it should probably be filtered first through some other people who, that you trust.
Tom, what strikes me with what you just said, not sharing anything until it's filtered, isn't that going back to what those girls were doing at the basketball game or the baseball game? They were taking a lot of different selfies or pictures of themselves and then looking for the best ones to post. So how is that fundamentally different?
Well, I think in this case is what I kind of said earlier too, that in a position like that, like he is in, it affects millions, if not billions, of lives, depending on what is said and are tweeted, and that does need to be taken into account. What is it? Will this help more or will it hurt more? I mean, that's always a question we try to ask ourselves before we say anything, before we write anything. Is it likely to help or to hurt? And and I think particularly in a position like that, or any of us actually, whether it's on an international level or a very personal one-on-one level, we want to, whatever we say, whatever we write, we hope that it's going to help as opposed to hurt.
That seems to me, I'm playing devil's advocate here now,
Okay.
That seems to me to be a value position. And it's not necessarily a value that's held by every individual. Is it going to help? Is it going to hurt? How many people am I affecting? So if that's not a shared value, I'm not sure what the question is. I'm not sure what, I guess I'm just pointing that out, and I don't have a question to follow that. But I'm just struck by the similarity and the common ground that I just heard both of you have with those girls at the baseball game or the basketball game. What sport was it?
Baseball.
Baseball. Okay, so the girls at the baseball game. So I was struck with, finding that empathy and that common ground between the two of you. But then if you go to the thing behind the thing or the question behind the question, their value is different than your value. And many people have very different values. I don't know. I should probably quit talking.
No, that's
because I don't know.
That's a very fair question or observation. Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah.
Some other questions.
Laura, I have a question from Ruth referring to the earlier story that was shared about the disabled girl, and I have Ruth unmuted. She may have a problem with her microphone, so I told her if she does, I'll just repeat the question. But Ruth, I have your microphone unmuted. Would you please share with us?
Hello.
Hi, Ruth. You're on.
Hi. Great. I just wanted to say thank you very much for being there for that girl. I'm disabled and it's degenerative, and I've noticed the lack of input from various people I would have called friends, and you forget your belovedness, in inverted commas, very, very quickly. So just thank you for that. I'm curious, going back a little way further, as to how you give people space and find the thing behind the thing when you're on social media. I don't know whether private messaging is the only way you can do that, but Facebook seems to be very fast-paced and emotionally charged. And certainly in a face-to-face conversation, I would give people space by being quiet, but that doesn't really translate to Facebook feeds. Does that make sense?
Sure does. Well, first of all, one of the things that we didn't say, it was brought up earlier about private group messages and chats. We always, all of our Facebook interactions with people, when we do this professionally, are private. We do it private messaging. We do groups. The two of us and one or two or three or four or however many other people are on that. That's always the way we do it, so that there can be that openness and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And again, we will often ask a person to just, can you explain more about what you just said? Can you just tell us a little bit more in more detail about this, so that we can begin to understand even more what you're going through or how you're feeling. So it's about trying to ask those questions to continue to very gently to dig deeper. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, Michael, because one of the things that I often use with my students is saying, tell me more. And there's always something behind it, and the invitation, and that's an overt invitation to get behind it, which I think is really powerful.
Or even to say, we'll often say that they'll express something and we'll say, that's really hard, isn't it? And that diffuses. That already, there's an acknowledgement that we get that, yeah, this is a tough situation, and that enables them, usually then they'll open up even more, because they realize, okay, that
you get it.
They get it. and so they can share more. It's also an invitation.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think Sheila had something to add. Sheila, is your microphone working?
I've unmuted it.
Okay. Yes. Well, it just seems to me that one of the concerns, and I loved all the discussion so far, and one of the concerns I think that comes up often is, we're always struggling with trying to determine who is the real person that we're dealing with. So on Facebook, I think it's a little easier to manipulate who the real person is, you know, by those edited pictures and what we choose to share and what we choose not to share. So there's that edited self. And then also on Facebook, sometimes there's that unedited self where people say things on Facebook that they would never say in person.
That's right.
And then you have the same thing happening when you're with somebody face to face. You know, there's something of an edited person there and something of an unedited person. And, you know, I'm just curious, because we're spending so much more time, it seems like more time communicating through social media. How do we determine who the real person is? Because even in politics, you know, it gets that their edited self sometimes goes through multiple editions or editings, and so because trust is related to what we think we know about the person, how are we going to know whom we should trust and based on what? And, you know, even face to face, sometimes somebody shares a vulnerability or something like that, and then we trust them, and then we find out later that we were being manipulated by them and it wasn't really the truth. Or so, I don't know, do you have any thoughts about how all of this editing / unediting is affecting really the deeper relationships? Because if we don't really know who the edited or unedited person is, how do we know whether we trust them, and how do we know whether we want a deeper relationship, or how do we sort of, you know, monitor that?
We're storytellers. We always have a bazillion stories. I can think of an example. We're strictly donation based. We don't charge anybody anything. You know, we do have a sliding scale that our board has created, but we have a lot of people who are on the margins who just can't afford much, if anything. And so we're always meeting and networking. And we had met with a very wealthier business man, and he invited us into his office, and we sat down. And throughout the course of that meeting, he ended up sharing some really deeply personal things that he was dealing with. And you could just tell that there was a lot going on below the surface. I mean, externally, he's got it all together. He's in a nice office, you know, has several employees, and externally you would think that his business is thriving, but you know, internally, as soon as we spent some time developing the relationship with him, we knew that wasn't true. And yet on Facebook, if you were to follow him on Facebook, he's posting all these kinds of photos that you would think his life is picture perfect and pristine. And I think we probably all have people in our social network who, you know that what they're projecting is not the real self. And so I think to answer your question as best as I can is that it's really important that we foster relationships, because we know that the reason that individual is posting those pristine pictures is because he's trying to present a life that you know,
he wishes he lived,
you know. But in getting to know him on a deeper level, we know that that's not true. And we know that that's just another mask that he's wearing, which is really sad and it's disheartening. But we can show him a lot of empathy and grace, knowing what's going on behind the scenes, you know, and why he is projecting what he's projecting. So I think it always comes back to relationship and getting to know somebody on a deeper level.
I would echo that. And you're absolutely right that when you said that people self-edited, social media has not invented self-editing. People are self-editing. They were long, you know, forever. You know, we've done that. And it's just a new way to do it. It's, you know, it's a different way to do it now, but it's the same old thing. And again, it's about being in a relationship and spending the time, sharing the time, giving the time to someone to develop a relationship that you learn more and more and more about who the true person is and whether they can be trusted or not. And we'll freely admit that we've both been hurt by people who we thought we could trust, and then have shared something and then find out that it comes back to bite you, or comes back in a way that's very hurtful. And yeah, we each can put up defenses too, because we're not sure who we can trust or not. But we also believe, again, this is going to be a value to Laura, that it's still worth, that we all need to have relationships in our lives. We all need to be connected with people in our lives, and it's still worth taking the risk. And sometimes losing or being hurt in order to find those relationships that are true and that are good.
The late Maya Angelou used to always say that we have to trust and love one more time and one more time and one more time. And it's a significant statement, and I think it applies certainly to all kinds of relationships.
Yeah, and whether they're through technology or whether they're face to face, it's really much the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I see that we only have about 2 minutes left for this second behind the scenes hour. So if anybody wants to share at this point, now is the time for you to do so. And everybody got quiet. So how about you two give us a final farewell story?
You love to put us on the spot, don't you?
I do. That's my job.
I was actually going to turn it back, and I was curious what if there's one or two questions from Phil's classes. Phil had just taken some time in the last couple of days to ask some of his students questions that a lot of millennials are asking, and I was curious maybe there'd be one question that you'd like to ask.
It was really very interesting because they're all millennials, and one of the questions we asked about the superficiality or the deepness of relationships. I had one student comment that he feels that social media fosters deeper relationships for him because he feels more comfortable with social media than he does face-to-face. And then I had another student who said that, well, I'm chatting all the time, I'm on social media all the time, I do Twitter and this, that, and the other thing. But then when I get together with my friends, we have nothing to say because we've been doing this all day long, and we're present with each other, but we're not really present. We're physically there. It was just so interesting.
Yeah. That is, and we've heard others say the same thing.
There's actually a great video that we'd recommend everybody check out on YouTube. It's called Look Up, and it was created several years ago, but it was another one of those videos that was created as a 10-minute clip, and it just exploded, got several million hits, I believe, because it was talking essentially about millennials. It shows the picture of 3 girls sitting on a park bench, and all 3 of them have their phones, and neither of them are connected with each other. But we would also argue that maybe they would be in the middle of an intense conversation with somebody else, one of their other friends. I mean, we don't really know. So it's not fair to necessarily assess that just because they're utilizing social media, it's detrimental. I think that's the point we're trying to make today overall, is that, there are aspects that we can redeem because everything's redeemable.
Perfect. Well, on that note, let me thank everybody for attending this first webinar in our 2017 series. Tom and Michael, so appreciative for not only the first hour, but your willingness to give us the second hour so that we could all listen more to each other. I know it's just been fascinating, and I see in the chat so many positive comments that are coming in. Just to remind the viewers that they'll be able to see this video on the ILA website at YouTube, and we will try to figure out a way to share the PowerPoints through the website. Phil, thanks so much for your technical moderation.
You're welcome.
And if you could remind people how to sign off, that would be terrific.
I sure will. Thank you all for joining. I'm also going to try to save our chat log as well. We've really appreciated it. If to leave is really easy. On the bottom of your screen in the control panel, all the way to the right, you'll see where it says end meeting, and that's all you need to do, and it will let you out. But on behalf of us here at the ILA, on behalf of I told you this was going to be great. I'm so glad that we did the extra hour, and I thank you so very, very much. And for Laura, thank you all for being here, and we look forward to your joining us again at our next webinar. Laura, it's yours.
Thank you. Laura Janusik signing off for ILA. Have a great day or night wherever you are in the world, and keep on listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.